So here's a weird story for you. There once was a black bear who overdosed on 40 kilograms worth of cocaine after finding a batch of it in the forest. This story starts with a drug dealer named Andrew Carter Thornton II. Here's some basic facts that we know about him. He was a former narcotics officer, a former lawyer, a former paratrooper who was awarded with a Purple Heart. He was also one of the heads of a drug smuggling ring in Kentucky known as the Company. So here's how Thornton's drugs ended up inside of the bear. It was September 11th, 1985, and he was on a coke smuggling run from Colombia. Somewhere in the northern part of Georgia, he stopped his plane, put it on autopilot, and jumped out. He had a parachute, but he was carrying too heavy a load, so it malfunctioned and Thornton's body ended up free-falling into a residential neighborhood. At dawn, an elderly man named Fred Myers woke up to find Thornton lying dead in his driveway. Fred then noticed that Thornton was wearing night vision goggles, a bulletproof vest, and Gucci loafers. There was also $4,500 in cash, a couple of knives, some rope, food rations, and 2 handguns. Strapped around his body was a duffel bag filled with about $15 million worth of cocaine. 3 months later, park rangers found 40 empty bundles of cocaine, but also a black bear that overdosed after consuming it all. They found Thornton's plane in the same forest, so investigators reasoned that since he'd already been carrying too much weight when he jumped, he must have dumped the drugs in order to return to them once the coast was clear. The bear was then sent to the morgue where the medical examiner performed an autopsy on it. He found that its stomach was literally packed to the brim with cocaine and listed the causes of death as cerebral hemorrhaging, respiratory failure, hyperthermia, renal failure, heart failure, and a stroke. But the bear's body was still in good shape, so instead of cremating it, the medical examiner gifted it to his taxidermist friend. After stuffing the bear, the taxidermist gave it to a local recreation area, which put it on display. It stayed there until the early 90s when the park employees were anticipating an incoming wildfire. In response, they evacuated the park and put their possessions, including the bear, into a storage unit. Within a month, the storage unit was robbed and the bear was sold to a pawn shop. The bear stayed in the pawn shop until it was purchased by country music legend Waylon Jennings.
But I can say I've never intentionally hurt anyone.
The pawn shop's owner told him about the bear's overdose, as well as its connection to Andrew Thornton. But it was already a story that Jennings was familiar with. He had first heard it from a man named Ron Thompson, who was once an acquaintance of Andrew Thornton's. You see, Thompson was known as a socialite who showed wealthy people a fun time in Las Vegas. But he was also a guy who ran in dangerous circles that Andrew Thornton was known to occupy. Anyway, Jennings ended up giving Ron Thompson the bear, who kept it on display in his mansion until he died in 2009. After his death, Ron's possessions were put up for auction, where an elderly man named Zhu Tang purchased the bear for $200. After his wife told him she didn't want it in the house because she hated it, Zhu Tang put it on display in his traditional Chinese medicine shop. By 2012, Zhu Tang died, and his wife kept the bear even though she hated it. By 2015, a representative of Kentucky for Kentucky, a Lexington, Kentucky clothing store, tracked the bear down and asked her for it. He told her that it's a part of Kentucky history, so she agreed to let him have it if he'd be willing to pay for the shipping costs. It took 30 years for the bear to return home, and now the cocaine bear acts as an attraction in the Kentucky Fun Mall. Around its neck is a warning about the dangers of drug use, which reads, "Don't do drugs or you'll end up dead and maybe stuffed like poor cocaine bear."
That's all.